I can ask the three of you to come back up here and sit here. We'll have a few minutes to ask questions of the panelists. So if you have a question out there, please raise your hand.
Corrie, you included Canada. I saw there were even maybe 9, 6, 7, 8, 9 on your angio. But can you talk about going global? You based it in the US, you've reached in Canada. Where does this go next from a global perspective, particularly on the rare cancers?
There's a button, yeah.
I'm not good with the technology. Couldn't figure out how to open my shower door this morning. That's okay. It's a great question. There are significant reasons to include patients globally, especially when it comes to rare cancers, rare diseases in general. And I think as we understand the genomics and molecular makeup of cancers, they will all become rare at some point. And so I think that we took the first step by being able to include Canada, which is, step number one. We would love to be able to include patients from around the world. And I think the way that we're going to be able to do this is by building it out modularly. I think that we can't just necessarily open this study across the borders because there are differences in opinion about what constitutes PHI, for example. And so, just trying to work with, institutes in the UK, for example, we would be significantly limited in the amount of clinical data that we would be able to both acquire and make available. So perhaps the next step to being able to open up beyond our own borders is to start with like patient-reported data and saliva, for example, just for germline analysis, and then we could build it out from there.
US, Mexico, Canada, free trade agreement.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we do have things translated into Spanish with that as a hope.
Just to expand on that question, because in our Rare Genomes project, we were trying to recruit all over the world, but were turned down by our IRB saying that they understand the regulatory and legal issues with recruiting across country boundaries. Yep. And I think Bartha Knoppers and others are starting to try to work on documenting what is necessary to recruit from but do you have any comments or any of you on that issue of a scientist in one country trying to directly recruit as opposed to partner with another scientist?
Yeah, I think that's actually key, is that we're a single institute IRB. This is not like a consortia of different institutes that would be housed in different countries. And we do have dedicated staff in our compliance office that are looking into the global kind of requirements country by country in order to help us figure this out.
I can say something about that. One of our patient advocates is an advocate for better testing. And you can do more or less the same by flying around the world and connect patient organizations with researchers to advocate that data is necessary for better research, better treatments, etc. And how we came up with this idea, that was Peter Keeling from Diaceutics asked me, can you help me, because I see that industry leaves 50% of revenue on the table because of lousy testing. And I looked at Peter Keeling and I said, well, I'm a patient advocate. It's not my job to improve revenue and profit of industry. But if I listen to you, is that if industry is not testing good enough, that also means that patients are not getting the best treatment that is available. So can we join forces and look for the win-win situation? And this is exactly what you can do in getting the data into research by asking patient advocates, so to join forces with patient advocates and to ask them to go into the patient organizations, the legal aspects of all the different countries. I mean, I live in Europe and we also have one Europe with 28 different legal systems, but we also have hundreds of patients organizations that can contribute to that. So I think, I'm not telling you that it's easy job, but it's doable.
Yes, in the back. Yep, you.
Thank you. So sort of similar question to the first one. I'm interested in how you see rolling this out to lots of different disease communities. Like you've clearly got a great start, but how do you do it for, you know, as many diseases as possible?
This question for me? Yeah. Okay. I think that we're going to start focused in cancer, and we will build these projects out, and we build them with patients within the community, so we can't just necessarily scale immediately. But as I said, we're going to be doing this cancer by cancer, and there are already amazing initiatives like the one that Heidi is leading, and the one that the ones that we heard here today that are taking these on across the board for other rare diseases, and there are ones for common diseases as well. And I think that what we're seeing is a paradigm shift in the way that we are able to connect with and communicate with patients, and that it should lead to other people adopting this type of methodology. I don't necessarily think it could or should be done by any one person or one institute. And so, I think that the models that we're all building and putting out there are really hopefully going to be adopted by more people so that we can accelerate these across the board.
Great. Yes, Ellie.
Hi, lovely talks from everyone. Thank you. I've got another question for Corrie. Have you had any interest from pharmaceutical companies about recruiting the patients into clinical trials through your platform?
I have not been. I have been approached by somebody who's interested in recruiting for clinical trials, and I think that that's probably the future of building cohorts like this. We're not there yet. We're just at this point building research and building an understanding and new level of rich data to share with the world. But if you have interconnected patients and you have a bunch of data and you have people that are hopefully trying to cure them, I don't see how or why we wouldn't want to, at some point, link them together.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
One thing you don't want to be is the next 23andMe, though. Okay.
Definitely not. We're not near there, and we're not near a place where we could do that. We have no discussions ongoing right now. It's just something that I think at some point will need to happen.
Yep. I have a question, and none of you really talked about return of results. And this is something I think a lot of studies are challenged with, how much emphasis to put on returning results back to patients and when results are ready for return. Some feel that only if we absolutely understand it and it's a clear diagnosis versus, in the story of Matt Might, they returned a result that was actually quite unclear, and it then led him to seek out the other evidence. So can you talk about the risk and benefits of thinking about the stage of return of results and its role in patient engagement?
I like the statement of Corrie that she said, if you work with patients, work with them before, during, and after the study, which means of course you give back the results. Yeah. So I think that's the way it should be done, and of course you need a lot of patients. You need a lot of data for that. You need a lot of patients, but don't be afraid to return back results that are disappointing. I mean, if you're not turning the results back to patients, you probably disappoint them more.
Yep.
If I can add something from the rare disease perspective, results means already hope in a certain way, but because it means there is a research process behind that, which is not always the case for these large orphan disease populations.
And I'll just say, when we worked with patients, we don't have a method to actually return results just quite yet, but we're getting there. So we started our project strictly in a research setting, not in a CLIA lab, with the hope that we could generate data quickly, fast, and get it out into the public domain as we built the CLIA process on the back end of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was just, excuse me, I was just wondering if you've, I love what you were doing, in fact, all the 3 talks, and I was just wondering if you've had any, as part of your questionnaires, the social impact of the diseases and the cancers on the patients themselves and their wider families, because I think within medicine we talk about how much it's costing the organization or how much the drug treatments are, but in the wider scheme of things. I was just kind of interested if you've got any statistical information on that side of things too, because it's usually it's usually a bigger number.
We have a wish list of about 50 surveys that we're working through right now in order to work with, to get information from patients, and certainly kind of social aspects, environmental aspects are up there in terms of information that we'd like to collect. This was actually, so our first follow-up survey was just deployed just a couple of weeks ago, and it was kind of proof of concept that we can at least collect this type of data, and so we're hoping to use the momentum of that to carry us forward and be able to collect data like that.
I think we'll take one more question in the very back.
I'm truly inspired by your talks, all of you, honestly. I'm also horrified by knowing the fact that a patient is not able to take a medication that's not approved, even though that they understand the risks. We talked about human rights yesterday, and the fact that patients don't have the right to don't have the ownership of their body, and having the decision to put in their body whatever they like, even if they understand the risks. I think maybe put in a legal framework that respect that aspect of or that right of patients owning their bodies. I think it will make it easier to share data and across continents and across countries, instead of making it make that decision centered in government or regulators and legislators. Can you speak about that?
I love your question, because, my fundamental principle in this is self-determination. I'm from the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands we do not have a right to try act. But in the US, I believe now over 38 states have the right to try act. And I think exactly what you say, patients should have the right to try based on good information provided by their doctors, and then decide yes or no this treatment. It's one of the most important topics that's on my mind, and I'm thinking of bringing this to court in the Netherlands and in Europe as well, because it relates to self-determination. So, yeah.
Great. Well, let's give a round of applause for our terrific speakers.